Okay. And just a note that we do have a reporter from Axios attending the webinar today who might share some content in future media. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mark Johnson, who is the Senior Vice President of Policy and Government Affairs at the Washington Retail Association. Mark is going to start us off with some statistics and background on this complex topic. Mark, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, and a big thank you to the Seattle Chamber for putting this webinar together and recognizing the incredible importance that organized retail crime is having on all of our communities, not just in Seattle, but across our state. And I really appreciate that. Let me start off by saying that safety is paramount in this community discussion, and that retail theft, organized retail crime, they all go hand in hand. You can't have public safety when you have rampant retail theft and organized retail crime. So first and paramount is the safety of our customers and the safety of our employees at our retail establishments. Next slide, please. So how big is this problem of organized retail crime and retail theft? Over 54% of all small businesses in the country have experienced an increase in theft in the last year. This is over a $112 billion problem nationally, according to the National Retail Federation, which reviews and interviews all of the retailers across the country. That equates to about $3 billion just in the state of Washington alone. And not only is the retailer out $3 billion worth in product in Washington, but local governments and state governments, the state of Washington, are out the tax revenues, the sales tax, business and occupation tax that they would have otherwise collected from the $3 billion. So you're out about $300 million in taxes that are uncollected because of the retail theft that is going on in our state. Next slide, please. So why does this matter? And hit the first one. Well, number one, it's extremely costly for retailers to have to implement new strategies and devices to protect both employees and customers and their team members that work in these retail establishments. But again, safety is paramount to this. Next one. Retail theft, organized retail crime, truly impacts both the mental and physical health of retail employees and customers, for that matter. When they witness a retail theft going on, if they're involved in a retail theft, and these are becoming more and more violent and physical with the retail thieves pushing, brandishing weapons and injuring our employees and our customers, it's very taxing both mentally and physically on the health of employees and our customers. Next one. Consumers and businesses are the ones that ultimately end up absorbing the cost, which include higher prices for products that they have. And next one, please. And also product shortages. When retail thieves clean off an entire shelf of, let's say, baby food formula, and the families go in shopping for baby food formula, for example, oftentimes they will find the shelf empty and unavailable and will have to go to another store or order it somewhere else. And so you'll continually see higher prices and product shortages as organized retail crime and retail theft continue on. Next one, please. And then the last and most draconian of all impacts in the retail industry is, unfortunately, store closures. When a store becomes dangerous for customers and employees and unprofitable because the retail theft, or as we call it in the industry, the shrink, exceeds the profitability of that store, a very difficult decision is made by the owners of that establishment to maybe shutter the store, redistribute the employees to other stores out there. And this leads to lack of shopping options. You will run into pharmacy deserts and shopping deserts and food deserts where stores have had to be closed. And it's the absolute last thing that a retailer wants to do. They're in the business of opening stores, not shutting stores down. So that is absolutely the last and most dire decision that they don't take lightly, and they do not want to have to do if they can avoid it at all costs. Next slide. So what exactly is organized retail crime, and why is it perpetrating not only Washington, but across the country? And organized retail crime is truly the monetary lubricant that helps these criminal rings in all other criminal aspects that you can possibly imagine. Human trafficking, it has been linked to the war on terrorism. These groups, gang activities, drug trafficking, weapon trafficking, international. We have had one crime ring linked to the war in the Ukraine, prostitution, child pornography, you name it. Organized retail crime is so much more lucrative, so much more profitable to steal from a retail establishment and monetize that stolen product than it is to steal from a bank. And the consequences and the chances of apprehension are so much significantly lower than if you stole from a bank. So that is why organized retail crime is and has continued to grow. And in this perfect storm, the COVID pandemic certainly did not help organized retail crime flourished under the COVID with masking and other issues that made it more difficult to identify the people that are perpetrating this. But organized retail crime is a global issue. There are many multinational organizations that are committing these. Just recently, a Romanian organized retail crime ring was interceded. A group out of Colombia, they know no boundaries, and they will go the path of least resistance. So it's a massive criminal activity that is impacting worldwide economy. Next slide, please. So there is no real silver bullet. People say, well, what's the solution, Mark? What's the one thing we can do to make this go away and make things better? And it's not. There's a multi-pronged approach is truly needed. And this, next, please. Number one is telling the story and educating community and elected officials and our decision makers about the extent and the depth of the problem and what some of the solutions are. So number one is education. Number two is making it harder to sell stolen goods. Most stolen goods these days are fenced online. So I'm glad Congress passed a national standard called the Integrity, Notification, and Fairness in Online Retail Marketplaces for Consumers. It's a mouthful. We just say the Inform Act. This makes that third-party platforms have to identify who they really are on. So they're literally parasites on law-abiding platforms. They are set up these dummy platforms to fence their stolen goods. This is saying they have to identify themselves a little more thoroughly, so it's more difficult to sell stolen and counterfeit products online. Number three, treatment. So the people that are committing these crimes in our stores are often suffering from substance abuse disorders, mental illness, or both. And these organized retail crime rings know this, and they will prey upon these individuals. They recruit them, and they'll prey upon them to do their dirty work and steal from stores, because they'll know they'll do just about anything in order to get the substance that they're addicted to, or because they're suffering from mental illness. And until we give them the treatment that they need and break the cycle, they will just keep reoffending. Locking them up in jail or taking them to a hospital that's not equipped to treat these disorders is not the solution. You need to have treatment services for these individuals that are being preyed upon by the ORC crime rings. Number four, the Washington State Organized Retail Crime Association was formed, or WAORCA as we call it, is a statewide task force that is specifically designed to go after these larger criminal rings. This is not for petty shoplifting or subsistence shoplifting when somebody is hungry and needs food, or somebody is cold and needs warm clothing. This is going after those crime rings that are stealing specifically to monetize the product, not for personal use. So this is a great organization that most retailers, both of the next panelists belong to this organization, and I really commend it to you. It's a very useful tool in the fight against ORC. Number 5. This is a national problem and an international problem. So our U.S. Congress has 2 bills pending before it called the CORCA Act, or the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act. We're very optimistic this bill will pass before the end of the congressional session at the end of this year. It will be likely attached to one of the spending reauthorization acts or the budget itself, and it has broad bipartisan support. 3 of our state Congress people have co-sponsored this legislation. And this will bring together groups like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the U.S. Secret Service, the Office of Homeland Security, all working off the same page, targeting organized retail crime nationally and globally. So we're very excited about CORCA passing this coming next few months. Number 6. And then finally, we realized very early on that providing resources for small and mid-size retailers that may not have loss prevention teams or officers working in their stores, may not have the sophistication or the loss prevention devices, cameras, etc., that they need some help. So we have the Washington Retail Association created a guide to navigating public safety and retail crime. It is a really useful guide for employees, business owners, to help prepare themselves, make themselves less attractive to these criminal crime rings, and protect themselves. And unfortunately, if they are the victim of a retail theft or an organized retail crime interaction, that they know what to do after that and how to help the police and the prosecutors best go after these individuals. So we commend it to you. It's just dropped into the chat. It's free. You can get a downloadable copy, or you're certainly welcome to get a hard copy. Just let me know and we'll be happy to mail it out. No charge for anybody that is a retail association member or not. And local governments, we're happy to distribute these anywhere that folks would find them useful. Next slide, please. So a couple of suggestions on things that could be used legislatively that are needed. Police pursuits right now are strongly discouraged or not allowed for property crimes in particular. What we are proposing and asking the legislature is to allow police with proper training, with proper authority, and only in safe situations where neither the person being chased, the law enforcement officer doing the chasing, or innocent bystanders are in any way, shape, or form in jeopardy of harm. These should only be done in safe situations, but we do think it's an extremely important. The criminals know that they will not be chased in the state of Washington for stealing from a retail establishment. They know that once they get in their car and they drive off, they are scot-free. And so we need vehicle pursuits in safe situations. Here is a really important one for the smaller businesses. I mentioned cameras, lighting, bollards out front to protect for smash and grabs. Small business grants. So the legislature will be introducing a budget proviso to provide small business grants for businesses on theft prevention. We think this is an excellent idea, and we'll be supporting that when the session begins. Organized retail crime enhancements. These individuals work in teams. They often work in multiple accomplices. They'll have a lookout. They'll have 2 or 3 people in the store committing the crime. They'll have somebody in the getaway car or vehicle out front. They don't just usually have one individual. It's usually multiple accomplices working in teams to commit these crimes. So we need stronger penalties for that and more tools for the prosecutors and law enforcement. And then another one is that we know that 20% of the criminal activity is being accounted for. 20% of the individuals committing it record about 80% of all the thefts. These repeat offenders, this is their job. This is what they're recruited to do. We need to have stronger penalties and treatments for repeat offenders to get them off the streets. We'd see a significant drop in the criminal activities if we had those tools. And then finally, in the state of Washington, it is not illegal to conceal product on your person or in a backpack or any other device. It is not illegal to do that until you've left the store. And at that time, it's too late to apprehend. The chase is on. People get injured, including the thief and the loss prevention teams and innocent bystanders. So concealment of goods should be made part of the definition of theft, and we'll be pushing that legislation as well. And then finally, as we well know in the city of Seattle and many other jurisdictions, law enforcement training and recruitment is critical. I just know the State Patrol is at a very dire point in their point where not a lot of folks are not signing up to become the state troopers. And this is really hindering the state of Washington and our local jurisdictions with providing safe and well-trained law enforcement. So we'll be supporting efforts on that as well. Next slide. And to wrap up, I just want to say I am delighted to come to any jurisdiction. I know we have a number of cities on the line and businesses. We will come to any business. We will come to any city, any chamber of commerce to continue spreading the information and answering questions and advising on best ways to protect themselves, what to do in the case that you are the victim of a crime, and how to best work with law enforcement and prosecutors and treatment specialists on this very important issue of organized retail crime, retail theft, and public safety. My contact information is there. If you have any questions or comments or want me to come out to your jurisdiction, let me know, and I'm more than happy to travel to your location and inform and help educate folks on the importance of organized retail crime. But thanks again to the Chamber and Sarah for having me here. And I'm delighted to stay on and answer any questions that the panel may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And now we're joined by our panel who are working in this space daily. Jeremy Gerard, a senior organized crime field investigator and president of the Organized Retail Crime Association of Washington, an executive board member of the Washington Organized Retail Crime Association. Welcome, Jeremy. We also have with us today Ryan Phillips, manager of organized retail crime and special investigations at Rite Aid Bartels of the Pacific Northwest. And unfortunately, Amy Moore, senior organized retail crime specialist for Albertsons and Safeway, was unable to join us today due to a family emergency. But we'll just kick off right into the questions here. Mark, I think I'm going to start with you. You gave us a quick explanation during your presentation of the difference between regular theft or shoplifting that a business might experience and organized retail crime. Could you expand a little more on that and tell us, how do police or even private security guards know if the person they've apprehended is a part of an organized retail crime ring?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Sarah, and we want to draw a very clear picture of the difference between shoplifting or subsistence stealing for people that are hungry or trying to clothe or provide for their families. One of the several of the real telltale signs are these individuals are literally given oftentimes a shopping list, either electronically or even a hard copy of things to go into and a store to steal from. And they will have a shopping list, just like if they were a regular consumer, of what to steal, how many to steal, and where to bring those products to be fenced and paid off. So anybody that's carrying a theft shopping list is usually part of an organized retail crime ring. And also they usually operate in teams. If you catch one individual, but there's several others that you also apprehend, they're oftentimes at the same time, they're oftentimes connected. And that is a sure tell that this is an organized retail crime ring that is pointing back to the multiple accomplices. And if it's the same individual that you catch time and time and time again, they're oftentimes employed by an organized retail crime ring. And this is literally their daily job. We had one individual that north end of Seattle that would be crossing Aurora from one home improvement store to the other home improvement store 2 to 3 times a day, stealing product from them and back and forth and being chased back and forth and apprehended multiple times. So those are a lot of the telltale signs that this is more than just a petty shoplift, that this is a criminal activity of the highest level in the organized retail crime ring.
And Sarah, I'll jump in on that as well. They're also
Okay.
typically going for large quantities of merchandise. And what they're stealing is typically, it has a very large resale value to it. So they're going for desired merchandise and using large quantities of it.
And Brian and Jeremy, I'm going to kick a question over to you two. You work in this space every day. What strategies and technologies are you utilizing that you could share with us that you found particularly helpful in reducing or deterring organized retail crime?
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that different retailers are doing. I'll speak just in general for retailers, not specifically for my retailer. But if you go into any large store, especially within, the Seattle market, for example, you're going to see armed guards at every single door. That's the unfortunate reality that stores had to do to make their stores feel safe. And then also to deter some of this type of activity. There's a lot of different technologies. There's great camera systems. A lot of stores have installed license plate readers, so you could see these individuals come before they even enter the store. They get alerts. There's a lot of facial recognition, which I know not everyone loves to hear that word, but there's a lot of different AI technology that retailers are starting to use as well that'll help identify some of these individuals. I know that's not always feasible for a small retailer, but any type of camera system where you can at least capture some type of face shot is always helpful when it comes to identifying and eventually prosecuting these individuals.
And all that, I think one of the other things that you're seeing a lot of, and it's unfortunate for both retailers and our customers, is retailers are being forced to basically box everything up, put everything in acrylic boxes or behind glass cases as a deterrent and a hopeful preventative for people accessing some of these high dollar value, high shrink items that are typically are referred to as like ORC related products that are typically being sold in a secondary market. It's very expensive for retailers to oftentimes have to create these custom glass or acrylic boxes to put our stuff in. And then as a consumer, no one wants to go in and try to grab some shaving cream and have to push a button and wait 5 minutes for someone to come and open the glass case. But it's the unfortunate reality, like Mark said, most retailers are very understaffed. We're consistently losing employees because they don't feel safe in the environment that they're working in. And so, that's another thing retailers are doing to try to help prevent some of the losses that we're experiencing. But it has a cascading effect.
And I would just add, Sarah, to your question, and Jeremy kind of triggered this in my mind, that with the license plate recognition systems, 9 times out of 10, these criminal activities are committed with a stolen vehicle. I mean, it is very, very common, especially in the state of Washington, where we can't pursue even a car thief. It is very common for the criminal activities to steal 1 or 2 cars. We're seeing more and more smash and grabs where they'll steal 2 cars, drive one through the front of a store, and load in the product or the funds into the other stolen vehicle and drive off and just leave the other stolen car. So these criminal crime rings steal the vehicles, vans, cars, whatever they can get their hands on to commit their criminal activity, sadly, and it's really rampant in our state.
You guys just triggered our next question that I have for you is related to policing, at our local Seattle Police Department and also at departments in other jurisdictions in King County and across the state. We have very real staffing issues. And so how can law enforcement agencies, in your opinions, better leverage their resources to respond to ORC? What types of partnerships might you recommend?
Sorry, go
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, in this day and age, most retailers, the larger ones, have organized retail crime investigators that work for their company. So we're kind of a force multiplier when it comes to law enforcement. We're able to do our own investigations. We're really able to package it up for law enforcement prosecutors. So having those partnerships are important. And some of our store security AP teams have really good relationships with law enforcement. And that can trickle down to small retailers as well. Sometimes you got to build those relationships, get to know your local officer that covers that area or law enforcement agency, and make sure that you're, providing them info on what's going on in your location. Oftentimes helps.
And I'll add, I think I have a unique perspective on this. I just retired out of law enforcement after 20 years in this state. So, speaking of Seattle PD specifically, they're doing a great job with how much they can manage right now. I think the biggest thing that would help organized retail crime in this state, talking about local law enforcement, is providing local law enforcement more support. Seattle PD would love to go and arrest shoplifters every time a retailer calls. There's a lot of roadblocks to that. Some of it is recent legislation that was passed and some of this police reform stuff. It's not really worth the liability for most law enforcement these days to respond to a shoplifting with the potential of having to use force on someone, because now they have to justify the amount of force used with the level of crime they're dealing with, and shoplifting is pretty low level, let alone all the other crimes that they're dealing with that are far more dangerous for the most part than shoplifting or a theft call that comes in. So local governments, state governments, providing law enforcement more support, more funding will allow them to start to get to address some of these other issues that agencies have had to basically put on the back burner and not respond to for the last couple of years. I know my agency did the same thing when a lot of this police reform stuff and the mass exodus of law enforcement happened in this state. We just stopped responding to some of these smaller property crime calls, like Mark said. We were too busy with the bigger ones, and some of the liability that now law enforcement had to entertain when what calls you do respond to, depending on what position you're putting yourself in, it just doesn't really equate. So it's a very challenging situation for them. And most law enforcement, I think Jeremy would agree, they're very receptive when him and I and our retail partners at our level reach out for investigations. It's just Seattle, when you're working 7 or 8 different shootings in a week, it's pretty hard to try to help out a retailer for an organized retail crime, property crime case.
And I would just add, on a statewide level, I met with a state representative, Bill Ramos, who is planning to introduce statewide legislation to create a law enforcement applicant pool for trained and qualified law enforcement officers. He recognizes he comes from smaller communities, Issaquah, and it's extremely expensive for these smaller communities to bring on law enforcement officers, to recruit and retrain them. So if there is a dedicated pool statewide that these smaller communities in particular can tap into of pre-screened, pre-read, and trained law enforcement, we think this is an excellent idea. We'll be supporting his legislation when it comes before us. And also mention the State Patrol. We also supported incentive bonuses and hiring and retention devices to get the applicants of state troopers back up again where it should be, and help retain and create more positions within that agency. So that's very important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all for those answers. So, when we think of these organized retail crime rings, usually high-priced clothing or good comes to mind as frequently stolen or fenced items. Could you each share other items that are top targets that might be surprising or new information to folks on this call, and why you think these items are targeted? And Ryan, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Some things I've found interesting, toilet paper and paper towels. Typically it's not a high dollar value item. A pack of 24 paper towels is pretty bulky, so it's hard to carry multiple. But I know my company has stores in Seattle that haven't had paper towels on their shelves in 8 months. And every day we get a truck, they're gone that day. And a lot of that is being sold at secondary locations throughout Seattle or the greater Seattle region. It's being sold on online marketplaces. being shipped overseas. You know, Pokemon cards and Legos are another high ticket item right now that we're seeing, and it's been interesting. It seems to trend. You know, high end cosmetics, baby formula, Tide, fairly consistent. That stuff is always on the top of organized retail crime offender lists. But eye care, eye drops, some of these other one-offs, for whatever reason, all of a sudden we'll have a huge uptick in the market for a few months and then it will die off and then a new product will come in. But those are some of the ones that I know I have active cases on right now. And like Mark said earlier, I've got a suspect in Seattle with 83 incidents, all with toilet paper, for about $6,000 at one location. And $6,000 is pretty small in the grand scheme of things, but imagine being an associate at that store who sees this guy come in 2 or 3 times a day. Seattle PD knows who he is. They would love to go arrest him, but King County Jail doesn't accept misdemeanor bookings. So that's another paradigm that law enforcement, specifically in Seattle, is facing is, are they going to put themselves out there in a liability situation to potentially end up having to use force on someone because they try to fight or do something when the guy can't go to jail for the crime they're going to investigate?
Jeremy?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Ryan, you didn't leave much for me. You kind of covered them all. So, yeah, I mean, Legos is a huge one. A couple of the retailers that carry large amounts of Legos, that's typically the highest theft item right now. Some of the higher end Legos, the ones that are $100 plus. And then over-the-counter medicine and health and beauty aids right now are really, really just, you can't keep it on the shelf. And that's why you see a lot of it locked up in some of the stores. And usually when you see a specific item being targeted, like paper towels, we have that same issue at our retailer as well. It usually means there's a fence or a location that's buying that in large quantities. And these individuals know what they're buying, so they're going to target what they know is going to be easy to sell.
I would just add 2 points. One, for home improvement stores, electric, cordless machinery, power saws, drills, etc., are very high theft item. I don't know a store that hasn't locked up all of their power equipment because of high theft. Unfortunately, the thieves are very ingenious. They'll literally go in and take a bolt cutters off of one aisle and go over and cut the bolts and the cages open to get at the high theft resell items in another aisle. So it's really taking extreme measures. I will add, and Brian triggered this in my mind, is that there is some hope. The Seattle City Attorney's Office, Ann Davison, has instituted something called a high utilizer. I call it the repeat offender program, where they're going after those folks that are committing 83 crimes of toilet paper or paper towels, and really focusing their efforts on this 20% of the thief population that are committing 80% of the crimes out there. So they're really, and they're working. This is unique, and I really want to highlight this as a positive, is that Seattle works very closely with King County, and King County has 2 dedicated property crimes prosecutors, Patrick Hines and Nicole Lawson. And these folks are excellent with working with Ann Davison and her team, because of course, you know, the city, you've got misdemeanors and then higher level felonies. They work as a team to really crack down on this. And so I see some hope and some light there and some real progress being made, to the point where our national partner, the Retail Industry Leaders Association, just convened a month ago what's called Vibrant Communities, and they're focusing in on Seattle and King County, specifically out of the entire country, for a pilot program on how to best help law enforcement, prosecutors, loss prevention. All of the major retailers in the country are participating in this effort. Both of these folks on the phone here and their teams are. You were at the meeting with me, Jeremy, and I'm cautiously optimistic that this pilot program for the next 8 months will bear some fruit, will speed up and address the issue of a lack of resources for both prosecutors and law enforcement, speed up and make it easier to report the criminal activities and to get results. So hopefully the Vibrant Communities program will bear fruit, and we'll know in about 8 months.
Yeah, we'll have to have you guys back so that we can get an update on how that pilot program goes.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, you spoke a little bit, Mark, in your opening about the Washington State Organized Retail Crime Association and the statewide task forces. Um, could you tell us a little bit more about, you know, what areas of organized retail crime these organizations are focused on? And what are there opportunities for the business community to support this work?
Oh, absolutely. My first plea to the business community is, and in retailers and other businesses, is report, report, report. If you don't report it, it didn't happen. And I know we have a lot of local government officials on the phone. In order for them to make decisions and to prioritize and dedicate resources, they have to know where the problems are and what is happening in their communities. And if you don't report it, it didn't happen. So report, report, report. And this kind of answers also a question in the box, and I hope we get to, I see a couple of questions in the Q&A, is insurance. So one of the reasons a lot of smaller businesses and mid-sized businesses don't report is for fear of losing their insurance. If they keep reporting that they've been the victim of a criminal activity, a smash and grab or something like that, they could lose their insurance. And it's a very real threat out there. And that's I understand that threat, very important, but reporting to law enforcement, even, you know, and it can be frustrating because they don't have the resources, as Ryan pointed out, to come maybe take that report physically, but reporting it online, making the phone call, describing it, collecting the information is critical for that. And the Organized Retail Crime Task Force that the Attorney General has formed, they're just about to make their hiring decisions. By the end of the month and by the end of the year, it should be up and running in full swing with investigators, dedicated prosecutors, and what we call the secret sauce, the data analysts that put together these complicated webs of individuals that are committing these crimes. And we're hoping that it serves as both a deterrent and an enforcement tool to go after these multinational, multi-state criminal crime rings that are plaguing our communities. And it'll roll out the unwelcome, Matt, that you're not welcome in Washington State. And if you are, you're likely to be pursued and convicted of your criminal activities.
Yeah,
it
go
kind
ahead.
of just stirred a couple thoughts. I mean, I want to second that. Law enforcement's very data driven. So if you're not following, you know, these type incidents that are happening, you know, they can't really put resources towards that area. And then I just want to clear up that I think is a misconception sometimes with larger corporations. I think small businesses might be different, but when we get items stolen, even a smash and grab, it's not covered by insurance. The only time we're covered by insurance is if our store is closed. So if we get like an overnight burglary, then we do get, there's some insurance coverage there. But if the store's open for business, it doesn't matter what happens in the store. We're not covered by insurance.
Oh, wow. Ryan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think they covered it pretty good there.
All right. Well, maybe a question to all of you. Do you have any advice for consumers on how they might be able to protect themselves from purchasing stolen goods, or inadvertently supporting retail crime, organized retail crime?
I'll jump on that one real quick, and it's really hard. It's human nature. You go online, you go on OfferUp, you go on one of these websites, and you go, wow, that Makita power tool in its original box with the spider wrapping on it, with the store identifier on it, that is a third of what you would pay if you went to the physical retailer. It's stolen. And I know it's really, really tempting for you to go, well, nobody's going to know. They're not going to find out. You're just encouraging this theft to continue on, and you're making it profitable for these organized retail crime rings. And the other thing is, you as a consumer might get burned if you say, oh, that Gucci or that Coach bag that's $100 when it be selling for $1,000, it's probably counterfeit or stolen. So you could be the victim as well by buying it for $100 and showing up and finding it's a cheap knockoff and you'll never get your money back. So just be really cautious when you're online. And if it seems too good to be true, it is, and it's stolen or counterfeit. So don't encourage these criminal activities from continuing on.
Are there certain platforms that we might see stolen goods on more so than others?
I'll
It
I'll jump in on that one. I mean,
Yeah.
really, unfortunately, there's so many of them nowadays, but, and this is not a knock against any of them. But OfferUp is a big one that you see locally where you're gonna see a lot of stolen product. And you could type in Tide or Formula right now and you're gonna see page after page of stolen merchandise. eBay or Amazon, really any of those platforms. And that's part of why organized retail crime has got to a level where it's at. It's just so easy for individuals to sell their product.
They will steal it in the morning. It'll be online in 2 or 3 hours after it's stolen. It is that fast. And it is remarkable how quickly they can do this. It's a business.
Well, I think we'll get to our last question here, as I'll give the audience members a little bit of time to get some questions into the Q&A box. But just on a closing note, I know that there are some upcoming state and federal opportunities for local businesses to get involved in advocacy. Could you maybe give us a last run through of what those next opportunities are and other ways that the business community could help your efforts?
Yeah, I'll jump in right off, and a big kudos to the Seattle Auditor's Office. They produced in September an awesome report, very detailed, very specific report on organized retail crime with 10 different recommendations, 7 different strategies going forward. I mean, it is fabulous. It's a great educational tool, but also it is a tool to take action. And I really commend the Seattle Auditor's Office for doing that. It's been embraced by the mayor, embraced by the Public Safety Committee, by the Chief of Police, Adrian Diaz. Now it's time to take action. Unfortunately, we're seeing closures of stores in Seattle because of public safety concerns. So now's the time to take that report and put some of those strategies and some of those tools into place and make them work. So I really commend them. I would encourage other local jurisdictions to do the same. I'm working with the city of Federal Way right now on some tools that they can utilize to increase the safety and crack down on organized retail crime and retail theft in that community. In a couple hours, I'm getting on an airplane and heading to the great city of Pullman to talk about public safety, retail theft, and organized retail crime. It knows no boundaries. It's all over our state. And so the more we can work as a team to solve this problem, the better off we're going to be.
Thanks. Jeremy, any closing
Right.
remarks for you, or ways that the business community could support organized retail efforts to combat organized retail crime?
Yeah, just similar to what Ryan said, get involved, go to your city council meetings, support law enforcement. Without law enforcement, these type of crimes can't be investigated or prosecuted.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm gonna open it up for Q&A from the audience here, and I've got a couple of questions. The first is from Eric Lonergan, who says, very fascinating and alarming subject. Thanks so much for educating us. I'm curious whether it has been established how much of the consumer goods inflation that we are now experiencing can be attributed to retail crime. And there's a comment attached to that says, I think increased insurance premiums, store staffing, and security costs will ultimately be passed through to the consumer in one way to another, leading to increased costs. And Mark, would you be able to address that question?
No, absolutely. And I think Eric is exactly right. The increased costs, I mean, paid security, additional paid security in these retail establishments is extremely expensive, very costly. and is usually a last resort to try to keep the store safe and a welcoming environment. So it is extremely expensive. And Eric's exactly right. The eventual costs of this increased store protection is borne by the consumer with a raise in the price of those consumer goods. So very, very true. And also the notice of the insurance costs going up. And other security devices and theft deterrent devices. More and more stores are putting in locking wheels on their shopping carts because people are literally rolling out with shopping carts. And so now some of them are instituting locking shopping carts. All these things cost a considerable amount of money. And that is the price that will be borne eventually by the consumer, unfortunately, and the shortage of products that this leads to as well when they're cleaning off the store shelves.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Mark. The one thing I just wanted to touch on is when you think about shortages of product, I think formula is a good example. It was all over the news, the shortage, and a lot of it was put on, the shipping piece of that. But in reality, that's one of the highest targeted items, and those stores can't keep it in stock because it gets stolen so often. If it's not locked up, it's getting stolen. They're stealing all of it. And a lot of product like that, it gets shipped out of our country as well. So that's a whole nother topic, but a lot of the product that we see stolen gets shipped to other countries as well.
And Jeremy, you bring up the formula, and it's a matter of safety. If it's not stored properly in the right temperature and the right humidity, that stuff can spoil and go bad. And then you're feeding it to your children. It is a real safety issue and concern out there when that stuff's re-entering the market and being utilized.
Absolutely. All right, we have another question from Pete Hanning, who shares that we have had businesses close their locations that are directly adjacent to bus stops. Any tools in particular that might help these stores?
Ryan or Jeremy, you guys have any ideas?
I mean, that's a good point. I don't know if I have a solution for that, but public transit certainly plays a factor in some of the stores that are more active when it comes to theft. A lot of these individuals use public transit. When you think of some of the trains in both Seattle and like Portland, for example, a lot of the stores that have stops near them are some of the highest theft stores. Again, I just think prosecution and identification is and getting these individuals the help they need, so they don't feel like they have to do those crimes.
And getting them the treatment they need and the resources they need if they are suffering from housing insecurity, substance abuse addiction, mental health issues, all of the above. Just locking them up in jail and is not the real solution, or taking them. So we supported a measure for crisis response centers where they can a police officer, law enforcement officer can take this individual that they apprehend to a crisis center and hopefully evaluate and get them the treatment to the right treatment facility rather than just put them in jail, which are A, overcrowded, and B, isn't going to help them get off of the substance or the mental illness that they're suffering from. And we feel that's a very important prong in the multi-pronged approach.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank a huge thanks to Mark and Jeremy and Ryan again for joining us today. As a reminder to our attendees, this webinar was recorded and we will post it on the event registration page and on our chamber YouTube channel by tomorrow if you'd like to watch it or reshare. Lastly, a quick note, you'll see some chamber membership information on the slide here. If you're not a member yet, we would love to have you join us and get access to great programming like today and some exclusive member benefits. Thanks everyone and have a great day.